What's going on, everybody? Doppler coming to you from the Gear Garage. Welcome aboard. Tonight is going to be kind of a wild and crazy show. It is my distinct honor to be able to have my dear friend, Mr. Jeff Slingluff from... Hold on, get rid of that countdown clock. There we go. Jeff, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. It's really good to see you, Doug. How you doing?
I am better by the second, especially when I get a chance to see you. So Jeff is from Boss and Roland, and he is one of the smartest guys I know. He's one of the most talented guys that I know.
Oh, dude.
He's one of the most hardworking guys that I know, and we are in for a treat this evening. So we are checking out a brand new piece of technology here that is this great little piece of, there we go. That is the brand new Boss GT-1000 core. And we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be playing through it. We're going to be messing with the editor. And we're going to be having all sorts of fun. There is a whole variety of stuff that is coming onto the horizon that Boss has just come out with. So we'll probably be talking about that. But tonight's main focus is going to be this lovely little morsel here, the GT-1000 core. So first of all, we absolutely will be engaging questions because I think, you know, anytime there's a new piece of gear, and I am, if you can't hear it in my voice and see it in my face, all right, hang on. I'm very excited about the GT-1000 core. I've been waiting patiently. So I am besides myself.
I like the calmness in your tone. You're like, just keep everything nice and even keeled, right?
That's right. All right. Well, first of all, hello to everybody that's checking in. Yesterday was a day kind of like no other. I think I want to take a moment and have a moment of salutation to a fallen hero. Eddie Van Halen, 1970, I guess it was 77. I went into a Warehouse Records, and if it wasn't 77, it was 78. Warehouse Records in Walnut Creek, California, and I bought this piece of vinyl, and that vinyl killed disco. And I don't really have a problem with disco, but disco killed the electric guitar, and Eddie Van Halen resurrected the electric guitar and took it someplace so incredibly special. So I just want to I met Ed upon two brief occasions. Once at a meet and greet for the Van Halen 3 tour, and it was the most fascinating thing. You kind of walk into the meet and greet, and Ed's behind a curtain, and you kind of come through, and he grabs your arm, shakes your hand, twirls you in close to him, and you take a photo. He's like, "Nice to meet you." And then, you know, it's kind of off to the next group of people. But it was just getting a chance to meet Ed was amazing. I also briefly met him at an AM show. And, you know, the influence that he's had, I cried a lot of tears yesterday. Jeff, do you have any Van Halen stories that you can impart upon us, or just, you know, under the influence of EVH?
Well, yeah, no. So, you know, at a former company that I worked for years ago, I worked for Line 6, and there was some stuff that he had come by that he was interested in working on. So we had a good number of meetings and him hanging out and stuff like that. And he's just completely a character. He calls me. He's like, "Yeah, we're on our way. You know, where should I park?" And I'm like, "Just park anywhere. It's fine. No worries." Right. And, you know, because he was showing up at like 5, and pretty much everybody had already gone home. And he's like, "Okay, great." Right. And so a minute later, he's like, "I'm here." I go outside, and he's parked his car on the front steps. And that's just the kind of character he was. And he had come by on several occasions, you know, which they never ended up doing anything with him. But at the time, we were discussing some things. And you know, we're walking down the hallway, and somebody's like, "Can I get an autograph?" And he's like, "Does somebody have a pen?" And somebody hands him a Sharpie, and he goes to the wall, and he just signs the wall. It's just like that kind of just, you know, outlandish, fun, you know, individual, and quite a character. Really interesting to sit in a room because we would be meeting and talking about various things, and he would pick up a guitar and he would just like talk to you and noodle as he played, right? Which, by the way, I never jammed with him, but at 1 or 2 points, I did pick up a guitar and just play a note or two so I can sort of go, I play with Daddy, right? I think it's fair. I was 3 feet away, right? So, but one of the things that was really interesting about him is he's not that tall of a dude, but he's got these massive, strong hands, right? And he grabbed your hand. It's like, that's the hand of a carpenter, you know, that's like a big hand. And it was right around the time iPhones came out, and I'm like, hey, dude, you don't even have an iPhone yet, right? And he's like, yeah, he's like, my clumsy fingers, I can't even type on those phones, right? I'm like, you are known for the most dexterity in the world, and you can't use an iPhone because you're clumsy thumbs, really? Right? So just an awesome dude, right? You know, and had some good hangs with him, you know, over 5 or 6 different occasions, you know, just hanging out with him. And you know, so just a sad loss. You know, I've been to his house once or twice, you know, and you know, he's very excited about all the gear. He's very excited to show you the old toys. You know, it's like, I use this for this, and I use this for this, and you know, and just, you know, just super, you know, aware of what was going on. Some things he did as a guitar player, which I found really interesting, is I mentioned he's got these big hands, and as he was sitting there jamming, you know, the guitar that he was playing wasn't that well intonated, and something I noticed that he was doing, which was crazy, is he was constantly putting his hand behind the neck and moving the neck, bending the neck to intonate the guitar as he was playing. And I don't think that anybody's ever really noticed that, right, in any of the interviews or anything that I've seen. But he would sit there and he'd play, you know, note, and you just see that thumb, and you just like push on the back of the neck. It's like he's re-intonating it as he's playing, which I have a feeling, because I think he played cello or something like that as a kid. So I think his intonation is just, you know, impeccable, and he's just constantly working on those things. So, yeah, I'm still, I think like most guitar players, a little choked up, and so really sad. So,
it's just, you know, it is part of this thing, but before we dig in, I think if I could encapsulate my feeling about this, you know, growing up, you know, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was an innocence about America where it wasn't this crazy dog eat dog thing where everybody seemed to be at their throats. And I'm going to get a little emotional. There was this wonderful post, I don't know if you guys saw it, that Valerie put up, Valerie Bertinelli, but like, you know, pretty much like everybody in my class, like, had a massive crush on Valerie Bertinelli, and it was I was absolutely sure that I was going to grow up and marry Valerie Bertinelli. That was absolutely in my plan of what was going to happen.
Yeah, if you had a choice between being that guitar player or marrying her, it was a tough choice.
Well, the idea was both, right? You know, so that was pre-Eddie, you know, because she was just the heartthrob. So, you know, Three's Company. No. No, wait.
I know. Yeah, it wasn't Three's Company. I'm trying to remember this.
Somebody will text it. They know. One of the other Valerie crush people. But the point being is that, you know, and that time when you somebody that's kind of been with you through that journey passes away, it's like a part of your history just gets put away in a drawer, and that chapter of the book closes, and it's just one day at a time. Thank you very much. There we go. One day at a time? One day at a time. I don't know. All right. So, okay. So, getting to tonight, Eddie, thank you. You know, I had a lot of tears, and I'm better today. So, Chris, thanks so much for that. All right. So, what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into a little bit of demo content that I've already got served up here. And I'm going to jump into something I had queued up with this little Telecaster here. So, let's start there. Okay. So, I love new gear, and I'm kind of like, like a 5-year-old kid. Every day is Christmas, so it's hard not to get excited because there's always something arriving. But the great thing is Jeff and I had a conversation about this, and I was like, Jeff, what do I have to do to get one here? And, these boxes show up and it appears. The interesting thing about using a piece of gear is usually within the first 5 minutes, you're either going to bond with it or you're not. And the interesting thing is that the amp model that I ended up just going, was really, it's a boss model. So, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and tell? And I'm gonna let's see, I've got the verb up here. But hang on, let me kill a little bit of the noise stuff here for just a quick second. Let me get rid of you for a second. There we go. All right. That for me is just kind of like hanging out in like the happy zone. It responds, I'm going to say it, like a tube amp. That little, kind of, that kind of super reverby stuff. A deluxe and a super reverb are markedly different animals once you actually get to know them. I like the deluxe a lot, but the super reverb has a touch sensitivity about it. I think because the 10s, they just move a little bit more with you, where the 12 just kind of is a little bit more of an equalizer. But what I love about that is I get quiet, I get louder, it expands, it contracts. Jeff, so this amp model, hang on. All right, hang on. Let me move everybody over to the editor here. So, and you know what? I'm going to do the editor with the little P and P. Come on. Why are we not seeing the P and P?
Nicely done. No, I can see both. Well, from my screen, I can see you and I and the editor.
Okay. All right. Great. Awesome. All right. So the deal is right. I'm in the wrong. There we go. Perfect. All right. Great. So the deal is this guy right here, amp 1, is where we're at. There we go.
Yes.
So this is the X high gain. And by the way, let me just take a quick moment and walk everybody through what it is that we're seeing. If we take a look at said GT unit, there we go. Now we're in the deep editor with a little PIP, a little picture-in-picture. So this is the signal chain as it goes from left to right. There are 24 blocks that can all be active simultaneously. So basically means they're just sitting there ready and waiting, which is...
Yes. If you see it, it may, like, you see some of them, they look a little bit grayed out, and you see some of them that are lit up. If they're lit up, they're being heard. If they're grayed out, they are not, unless, of course, it's like a delay that's got spillover turned on. But for the most part, everything is available at all times. So a couple quick things. Number one, there are 24 simultaneous blocks. You will never go to turn on or ask for anything and have it say, no, sorry, I'm out of DSP. Everything is on. Everything is available, including 5 simultaneous delays. So, and there's several reasons for having all the blocks on. Number one is patch change time. Right? There was a big thing. There's 2 things going on inside this box that make the patch change extremely fast. Number one is every block is already in there, so it doesn't have to turn on a block. It doesn't have to re-render the signal flow. Typically in DSP, you have to re-render everything. So it's like, look, oh, I want to now change out to a different effect. Well, then it's got to like basically deconstruct it and re-render it real fast, and then put it back into play. With this having everything on, it never has to do that render thing. Additionally, it also forward looks to the patch above and beyond, above and below where you are, assuming that you're going to go up or down a preset, and it's already loading those presets so that if you go to switch again, it's even faster than it could already be by the fact that everything's on it. So it's a extremely powerful thing. Doug, if you go back to that picture for just a second, one of the things that is also extremely powerful, the editor, if you wouldn't mind.
I tell you what, I'm going to go no PIP. I'm in text for a moment. Go for it. She's all yours.
Right. So if you can see from the signal chain on the left, you see a tiny, tiny little guitar over there, and it goes up and it hits that little block where it splits into a signal flow that goes up and a signal flow that goes down. That is a divider that it splits that up. You can now run things in parallel, and there are more than one divider, so you can actually run 4 parallel things side by side to each other. They can even be nested inside of them, which we can show you how you can do that. So you could have one path going across the top, and then the bottom path has a path that goes and then splits in stereo. Sorry, not splits in stereo, but splits with parallel. So maybe you've got an auto swell on one side and your normal signal underneath it, and the auto swell is kind of bringing in like an octave underneath it or something like that. So this is just one of those fundamental things that you can kind of route everything where you want it to be. Additionally, because you have 2 amps at once, you have the 2 effects sends, which we can get into. You can put an effects send and return on either side. You can put an amp on either side, and you can put a cab on either side. So you can even get into things like, running a dual rig kind of thing. In a live scenario, you can run this thing as just an effects processor. Just use it in front of your existing amp. At home, you can run it, with cab simulations, with IRs, and all those things going straight to your recording device, direct out wherever you want to go, and we'll get a little bit more on that. Or because it's so powerful and every block is on, you could even run 2 completely different rigs. So Doug and I were talking about this yesterday. We did a Dreamcatchers event a couple years ago, and Phil Collin was there, of Def Leppard fame. And Phil was talking about how live, on stage, he has his live physical amps that are loud. He has in-ears, but he also has them live so he can feedback off them, and also the bass player likes to hear them apparently, because he doesn't like in-ears. And on stage, he has way too much distortion. He has way too much delay. It's like guitar player's dream. It's this big, wet stereo rig on stage, and he's like, in his element and in his fun. But they take the signal off his guitar and break it off, and then the sound front of house has a completely different modeler of some type. So I don't know what they're using, but they've got another direct rig, and they've dialed in the sound for each song from the record. So the audience might be hearing a clean sound with a delay that's tapped, synced, and on stage he's wailing with this big metal tone. And with GT-1000 or GT-1000 Core, you could totally do that from one box. So in a nutshell, if you can think of it, 95% of what you can think of, it can probably do.
I'm going to tag team on that. You're just setting me up for success. So Chris Stark asked about 4 cable methods. I'm gonna see you and raise you 20. So the great thing about this box is basically everything that you can do sonically, routing wise, DSP in the GT-1000 you can do inside the GT-1000 Core. It is an inconceivable amount of processing power in a box that's that size. And I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to jump out of the editor here for a second because I'm going to tell a story. And I like telling stories.
Okay, go ahead.
So
that's what we're here for, right?
Absolutely. So actually before I toured Europe, when I got ready to do my last record, I put out this record called New Instrumental. And I was influenced by bands like Korn and in particular Limp Bizkit. Now, not everybody loves Fred Durst. I realize that, but I am down with the Biscuit. And Wes Borland's tone and his playing and his effects, and he had like a million boss stomps in his rig, like Wes Borland dialed. Same thing with the Linkin Park guys. So I wanted to make an instrumental record that was kind of in that vein. So basically, what I also was kind of getting into the Tom Morello headspace of like, what if I use a different sound? The other thing is, totally blanking on the name of the Satriani record that came out in 1999. It's one of my favorite records that getting old, sleep deprivation. But basically, Joe had a different sound on every song, and I was like, I love that because you're taking people on this effect journey and you're using that in a very powerful way. Short story long, I marched down to my local guitar center and I bought a GT6. That GT6, I used it for all the melody and the lead tones on the record, with the exception of the voice box. The rhythm guitars were recorded with a Marshall DSL and a Mesa Boogie. And when it came time to tour for that record, I took my GT6 and a 7-string to Europe, and I opened for Gilby Clarke, and we, did some like 10 countries. That was my rig. So as part of my backline, in the writer, there was an amp with a effects loop, and I ran out on the back of my GT6, set on basically loop return of an amplifier, because that's kind of a thing that Boss has been doing with the GT series for quite some time. And that was my sound. So basically, whatever amp was there was great. Now, I have one funny story, because I think this was the gig that I met my buddy Eamon O'Ryan in Ireland. So, like, I plug into the rig. I think I did my sound check. Everything's fine. And I go up to do my set, turn the amp on, nothing. And, mind you, it's 4 minutes before you're supposed to go on, because, you're thinking, oh, this is great. I'm in, whatever city I'm in Ireland. This is going to be an amazing gig. And that moment, like, you're counting the less than 5-minute mark, and you're like, disaster has struck. So I'm like, all right, well, let me go down the list of all the things it could be. It's like, I think that there's a possibility this Marshall amplifier that I'm playing through, if there's not an input cable in the input of the amplifier, the effects loop's not going to work. And sure as heck, I plugged the cable into the front end of the amplifier, and the wailing guitar ensued. And my buddy Eamon is still friends with me, so I guess the gig went okay. But the point being, it was just one of those moments. Is like, hey, hello, everybody. First of all, again, thank you for everybody that's hanging out tonight. So great to see you. We're going to have a bunch of fun, so it's just beginning. So that sound was the sound of New Instrumental. That was the sound of that tour, and it was such a great experience. And then after that, I came back, and I got asked to do, because of that record, I got asked to be one of the Guitar Hero session players. And the DSL was on a bunch of stuff with a Palmer, but I had bought the GT8 somewhere in the midst of all of that. And I think collectively upstairs I've got a GT. The GT6 I sold, which I regret. I'm an idiot. I've got a GT8 still. I've got a GTN. I've got a GT100. I got a GT1000.
You have everything you've ever had.
I have No, I sold the 6 like an idiot. Moron. But the thing is the GT8 kind of had everything. I moved my sounds over. So in any case, the Guitar Hero thing, my favorite story, and some of you heard me tell this, but one of the songs I played on was Wrathchild. And it's got this amazing wah solo. And it was kind of, I think it was like spring, and I'd been recording all night, so the dawn, the light comes up, and it's foggy dawn. I'm looking out the window, and it's this mist, and I'm laying this wah solo. It was an epic moment that we got a chance to experience, but it was just one of those rock and roll things. I've been up all night. I'm laying the wah solo. This is the greatest thing. A whole generation of people are going to wish they could play guitar and are going to get a chance to do it with this game. It was just a moment. So, and on top of that, I've got more Boss stuff that I can shake a pick at. But in any case, I digress. I want to play another track real quick here, so we can actually talk about this. I'm going to go for, all right. Well, I'm going to jump back over to this other track for just a second, and I'm going to jump back, and I'm going to tell you why. Hang on a second. Okay.
So fun.
Oh, and here comes the fun part. That is the same amplifier with the DS1 in the front end. It's the same sound. So there was a demo, and I grabbed it, but I haven't actually queued it up for the marker. But maybe I'll pull it in a second. But there was a demo of somebody doing this, and they were using that particular sound, and I lost my mind. I was just like, it's so metal. It's so metal.
Yes. You had told me that earlier today when we talked. You're like, oh my, I've heard this sound today, and I'm just totally into it. So that was great. Well, and what I love is that in the GT-1000, there is a good number of amp tones that are inside of it, right? And the amp tones, they use technology which we refer to as AIRD, which is augmented impulse response dynamics, right? Dynamics being the key word, and that's a huge part of it. And there's a good selection of them. But there's also a massive selection of not only good effects, from Echoplexes to RE201s to Benson Echo-Rex and stuff like that, but just the distortion pedals alone is a great selection of things. Not only classic boss effects like a blues driver, but a lot of things that you'd want or expect, like a tube screamer, which to me I just find funny because a tube screamer is a knockoff of an SD1, which so that's always fun to me. But we knocked off a knockoff of our knockoff. So
knock it off.
Knock it off, man. Right? Yeah. But the so you can take those amp tones that are in there, and they respond extremely well both to the internal distortion pedals that are available and external distortion pedals that are on your unit. There's simple things like most effects processors. They've got a 9-volt possibility because that's why you use a 9-volt battery, right? Because it's plus 4.5 volts, negative 4.5 volts, and that's what you get. But we do have products that
wait. Okay, you got to understand, Jeff's a genius. I have no idea what he's talking about. So,
okay,
can you explain that?
Not a genius, but I know a few nerdy things.
No. Okay. This guy is a certified genius. All right, hang on, hold on, full stop. The guy that invented the DL4.
I did do the DL4, yes.
You could stop. You could have stopped there, if there was. So the DD3, the Boss DD3, is the single longest. And I apologize, I may interrupt you tonight. I'm just excited to see you, my friend.
No, that's fine. I'm just excited to chat with you. It's awesome. Let's go ahead and just spiral wherever.
All right. The DD3 is the longest in production delay pedal of all time. And not only that, the DD3 is based on what delay?
It is the SDE 3000 shrunk down. So what is awesome about this? But one quick correction. About 5 months, 6. No, I don't. I can't tell time anymore. I've been stuck in a house for the last 7 months. Last year, we updated the DD3 to the DD3T. So, as old as it has been around since the 80s and stuff like that, it's actually now got called T. It's the same pedal, but we've added tap tempo to it. So that was a nice little update. But where that comes from is actually the president of the company right now is a gentleman by the name of Yoshi Ikegami. Awesome dude if you ever get a chance to meet him. And Yoshi has been at the company for 36 years or something like that. He started off on the line, started doing engineering at night, and eventually started working on products. And he is actually the one who did all the first DSP, all the digital signal processing in the early 80s for all of the early Roland Boss digital stuff. So the first product that he worked on was the SDE 3000, which was a rack mount delay that still to this day is just one of those quintessential delays. If you're going to say, here's a list of things that you need. I need an EP1, I need SDE 3000, those quintessential sounds. That's it. That pedal, that box is just a gorgeous box. I still have one, by the way, and it sounds amazing. Many great artists use them for years. They're really awesome. Well, he designed the chip that was on there, and it was a full size board, and they shrunk that down because they wanted to make the first delay pedal for a guitar player. So they took that same size, that same exact chip that was in there, and then did all their work that they can to reduce it. Yeah, that's Steve. So Steve apparently had two of those that he had used for years and years and years and years and years from his original rigs and stuff like that. He gave them back to Yoshi about 5 years ago as a gift, right? So in Hamamatsu in Japan, they're sitting there with Steve's signature on them. So that's under glass. So it's pretty cool. And they are just that quintessential sound. And so they shrunk them down and they made it into the DD2. Then it was quickly updated to the DD3, and that was like 1984-ish, I think. And that up until last year was a continuing running product, and then it got updated to the DD3T. Now, the thing that I always loved about the SDE3000 and the DD3 is why we called it digital. It said digital delay right on the name of it. Really, it was only digital for one moment, and that's the sample and hold, because everything else, the feedback loop was all analog. The signal getting into it, normally when we talk about a digital processor today, it's got an input and an output, and then everything is done inside. On the DD3, it was like everything's all analog except for this one little place where they basically just replaced either the bucket brigade or the tape with the hold the sample device for X number of milliseconds or whatever. That was a digital process, but the rest of it was all analog. And it's you can hear it, the tone of it, you can hear it in the character of it. It had this nice like second harmonic overtone that was over it that I've actually measured on both of them. And even the DD3T that has carried over. And even if you get into like the DD500 or into the DD200 or the GT-1000s, they've got that as well. Just this really gorgeous, analog-y harmonic tone along with this really swimmy, beautiful modulation sound. Just an awesome device. I see Doug pulling stuff out. Oh, you have one?
You know that.
I know you have everything. Right? Right. Actually,
yes.
The truth is you probably have everything times two.
Well, I sold, ironically, there was a period of time that I had a pair of SDE3000s. You're completely correct. Now, Frank Gambale had a guy in Los Angeles that added MIDI functionality to them. But the Yamaha D1500 was, to my understanding, the first digital delay that had MIDI. And so there was a period of time that I ended up using a pair of Yamaha D1500s, and I know this would be hard to believe. I still have them. But I had a pair of these, one that was for a longer delay and one that was for a shorter delay. And I think this one still has Steve Vai's short slapback echo on it that he used on the Alcatraz song. But something's kind of neat about this particular it's a one-space rack, which is exceedingly cool. And that handwriting there, it's not going to autofocus because I've got it set to I. But it says sold to Doug D. So that's Joe Satriani's handwriting. So back at the old teaching studio when this would have been when I was still studying with Joe, they had these one-space racks that came over from Japan. And so I asked Joe to have the owner, I wanted to buy it. So Joe set it aside because our lessons were on Saturday and I think the store was closed. And I was kind of crafty. I did a couple of things. No, that would have been the midweek thing. I very cleverly had my lesson be Joe's last lesson. Because one, I got a little extra long lesson. And two, then he would give me a ride to the BART station, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit. So I had a car ride with Joe as well. So I was like, I milked that puppy for everything it was worth. And I think he kind of he knew what I was up to, but he humored me. So that SDE3000 is lovely. Okay, so we did have a question, and I want to come back to all of this goodness, but Chris Stark had asked about the 4-cable method. So, Jeff, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in for a quick second. And did we get to the 4.5 volt thing?
No, we never did.
We never did. So, okay, so the thing is, you absolutely can do the 4-cable method. And the neat thing is the way it's set up, and Jeff and I are going to be doing what we believe is going to be a series of short videos on a range of topics, really walking through what you can do with this box. And that includes a number of the different routing solutions. The Wazatube Amp Expander is here, and that's actually, that and that literally are Joe Satriani's amps. And so I have his permission to put a reactive load on there, and so we're going to use that to build some cool stuff. And the great thing is because there's true dual paths, you can do all sorts of very interesting things like Jeff was talking about. You can have basically your DAW signal chain and your stage signal chain. You can have dual signal chains for dual rigs that you toggle back and forth between. There is not necessarily a massive amount of foot switchery going on here. But the thing is there's still enough to get around. One of the things is it's got a really nice size display. The other thing is I am actually powering it right now. I don't know if it's going to be in screen. There we go. You should be able to see it. That I'm powering it with a one spot. So this is, is the convenience of this unit is that it's 600. How many milliamps?
I think it's 650 milliamps, right? So it'll run pretty much off of anything. So it's a standard barrel connection, 9 volt, and a very low draw, right? One of the advantages of what we do, the reason we have so much processing power in there is it's our own custom chip. And in designing our own custom chip, we designed it to be very convenient on power, right? And also doesn't waste a lot of stuff on stuff that you don't need. When you buy off-the-shelf chips, there's usually a bunch of pre-done stuff inside of them, and you can either, tap into what's on that chip already pre-written and use it for yourself or not. So often when you buy an off-the-shelf brand chip, it's like, oh, there's 20% of its processing power sitting there doing nothing because I don't need it to do that, and so having a dedicated chip that was designed for music, that was designed for this specific task, allows us to really focus on that and keep its voltage down, and also be able to do 24 blocks of stuff at the same time. And when I say it's doing 24 blocks of stuff, I didn't mention that it's, this thing has a 32-bit A to D. Our products are the only products that I know that have 32-bit A to D and D to A. It's 32-bit floating point internal, and it's 96 kilohertz sampling rate. So it's, it's not that it's running efficient on its voltage because it's running slow. It's running at a really high speed and a really high technical level, and still being able to keep its voltage down. So it's pretty cool.
Genius. All right, I'm going to attempt to have questions come in here. So, I was saying attempt. I got him in. I got him out. So David has actually been messaging me, asking about the katana thing. He said, Doug, are you going to demo the katana? And I think at one point I said, well, my buddy Jeff has yet to send one.
Well, yeah. We could probably figure that out.
That's me
Right?
being totally naughty.
Yeah. And to anybody at home that's tried to order one, there's, there's been with the coronavirus and so many people sadly stuck at home and stuff like that, products, like the katana, the wtih, things that allow guitar players to get that loud, dynamic vibe from their amp, but at a controllable level because they're all stuck at home. Things like the katana because it has the power mode. Things like the wtih because you can take your tube amp and control it at a decent level while it's still, master volumes on 10. Or even the GT-1000 or now the GT-1000 Core have really, allowed people to have a good sense of feel at a reasonable volume. So a lot of those products for us have been challenging to keep up with the demand. And if anybody's been, behind on getting something, just so you know, there's a bunch of stuff coming in the next month. So maybe we can work that out for Doug too.
Hey, I pulled this up in the editor here, so we're going to tag team here. So where I'm at, I'm in the wrong window. That's where I am. So basically, I went from this area. I selected the menu, and then I've got my output settings. This is kind of a standard Boss dealio, where you can choose what you're actually running into. And this is basically what I did on that tour, where I basically used a tube head with a 412 cabinet. There it is. That's the equivalent of what it would have been a JCM 2000 412 return. And
Yes.
It's interesting. I saw that you guys had the JVM 410H, so I'm really excited about that. But the Katana stuff is in there as well. So I just figured I would mention that. Not only that, it's interesting. You have it set up both for both the return and the input, which I
Yes.
thought was very interesting because obviously you're going, hey, people are going to potentially want to route it in a couple of different ways. So with that said, let me close the trap and let you do the app.
Well, so one of the things that's really interesting about this product is it has the aired technology, which I mentioned is augmented impulse response dynamics. Now, part of that is if you just put it in recording mode, you're really going to get a sense of the speaker reflex, because most people don't realize that when in a guitar amplifier, everything from the input jack to the speaker, it's all kind of moving organically back and forth. It's like everything moves through, the speaker moves, and it sends voltage back. This is your presence knob on your actual amplifier, right? The presence knob is actually the impedance of your speaker moving and feeding back into the amplifier. Well, that dynamic and that feel, you have things from power sag and stuff like that, but also that speaker impedance, which is part of the reason that they cut through. So what the engineers did for the GT-1000, GT-1000 Core is they worked on one, trying to get that dynamics and that feel so that you could put it into a PA system or recording device. And it, and Doug and I were talking about this earlier, how GT-1000 will sit in a mix different than you probably have experienced with any other type of modeling device. It just sits like you've tracked it really well. And if you're playing it through a PA system, it cuts through the band as if you've got a loud amp. You guys have all probably experienced that thing where you might play through a PA speaker and it sounds okay, but it just isn't quite sitting the same as if you had your amp on stage with you. So this will cut differently because of that aired technology, and it's taking into account that output stuff. But those modes which Doug is talking about, it actually, as you select those, it will change the field dynamics and frequency response to counteract whatever you're plugging it into. So like Doug mentioned, plugging into JVM. Well, the JVM, if I plug it into effects return, it's got its own sense of frequency response. It's got its own sense of dynamics. And so it's actually going to compensate for that. So you should still get about the same amount of sag with, whatever amp tone you pulled up and your JVM, whether it's in the JVM or JC120 or the front of a, deluxe or whatever you happen to be plugging into, or a PA system. And it's always trying to compensate and set those modes for you up. And it's really a complex thing that's going on there. And but yeah, it's cool.
Genius. All right. Richard Doyle, what's going on, mate? Can Jeff talk a little bit about the tech used to allow the delays to complete even though you switch a patch, please? That I believe he's asking about spillover. Is that correct? What do you guys call that in this unit?
Yeah, it's called spillover, right?
Okay.
Some people call it trails, and yeah.
Rich is a tech genius, so he knew it was a spillover.
I think we all did. Yeah. So there's 5 delays inside the unit, and again, everything is always on and always available. And one of them is called a master delay, and that one has all your big DSP fancy delays. If you want a Benson Echo rec with a lot of wow and flutter, for example. Then the other 4 are a little bit more simplified, standard, but they've got modulation and things like that on them. Each of these delays can be set up to be, first off, they can be either individually set by milliseconds or individually set by note value. So you can set up a master tap tempo, and one of them is doing eighth notes, one's doing quarter notes, one's doing dotted, whatever. And they'll all sync to that. And then what you have to do is you have to go to, I'm spacing real fast because I'm talking, but I think it's the last, if you page fully to the right on the end of each delay, you can choose if it's spillover, and it might be in the master section. I always space on these things. But yeah, there's one of two methods. Let me see if I can find it myself. I don't have my unit's back behind me instead of in front of me. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
You're back to front.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're both so much for the great presentation. I was like, hey, this is going really well. I was like, I know what, I'm going to go back to the ATM here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, but yeah, it's on the last page of the master delay, I think, right? And so you just scroll over to there, set it to spill over, and the delay will actually spill over, and they'll go. Right? And you can set each one of them to spill over independently or not. So, but Doug, this isn't as bad of a crash and burn as the last time you had me do this, right? I went to play something and I had a Les Paul in my lap, and just sitting poorly, and I'm playing pretty decent, like this little Queen riff or something like that, and then just ran into my leg and totally crashed and burned with full embarrassment. So, Apparently, I can be embarrassing with you.
I do a pretty good job on my own, so it's good to have some company. I tell you, I'm going to pull up another clip here, and then we'll just kind of come back and if we've got any more questions, and then we will get to this 4.5 volt thing because I'm like, there's an Eric Johnson story in there somewhere. I just know it. So
Well,
okay,
and
no,
I'll
let's
get
go
somewhere
there.
else with that. That'll be fun.
Okay, well then.
Oh, do you want to go there first?
No, let's pull up a strat. Let's pull up a strat. That's the same flippin' amp, dude. Okay, so let me explain why I'm freaking out about that. Back in the olden days, when there were amps that have 3 handles on them, there's only one amp in the room that has 3 handles on it.
Yes.
It's a British amplifier, best known for making wonderful use of the EF86 preamp tube, which is a glorious sound. But literally, it's an amplifier that like chiropractors beg you to buy. They're like, go out and please buy 2 of them. Play them in stereo. You'll love it. But the thing is that finding one amp that you can use for your bass tone and then color it is the name of the game most of the time in a band setting, because it means that, it's kind of, I'll use John Petrucci as the perfect example. Their mixes have so much stuff going on. If John was going for radically different tones on every song, you'd hear him 50% of the time or 50% as much. But when you have a great bass tone to work with, and then you can add stuff on top of it, and the thing that happened when I on that first track with the drum groove, my secret sauce inside Pro Tools is I use the precision limiter for my mastering, -4 dB, never go above it. So I don't want digital distortion, but I also use the 1176 Rev A with the Andy John preset for his stereo bus setting, and I'll adjust that. But that is like the secret to make the glue come together. And what's great about the precision limiter is you can start to turn things up, and where your traditional limiter starts to squish things and make the shape of the mix change, it somehow does this mysterious thing where everything gets louder, but the proportion stays the same. And you guys have probably heard me tell you the story before. That precision limiter was based on a bunch of very, very high-end mastering gear that John Cuniberti had at the plant when the plant was still the plant. And the UA guys came to check out the EMT 140, which is like, again, was used on all the Fleetwood Mac stuff, and just like the most arguably famous, besides maybe Sunset Sound, which had to have had a 140, but there are so many iconic records that were made at the plant. That EMT is iconic. So that's basically in my computer, which, that's my go-to when I want to go for a reverb. Short story long, the ability to manipulate your track, usually you're trying to push the guitar forward, somehow get it so it's ahead of the drums, and as the snare drum and the kick drum are firing, it's not being masked in the mix. And quite often to do that, you got to get it a little too loud. And I'm not big on EQing stuff. As a demo person, generally speaking, my strategy is like, look, I want people to hear as I heard it. My job is to try and capture it as I did in the room or in the box without having to mess with it. So I'm being honest and faithful. So you go, it either worked or it didn't, whether you liked it or not, whatever. But the goal is to give you an honest representation. So that thing was pushing the drum loop out of the way. And I'm like, I have never, ever had that happen. Because the guitar was just like, get out of my way. Nuts, dude. Nuts.
Yeah, but in a pleasant way, right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It has a lot to do with the attack, right? So, where you really hear a lot of modelers kind of fall a little bit short is on that first just initial attack. and it has to do with the speaker impedance. It has to do with transformer distortion. It has to do with power sag, and it's just a very complex amount of things going on all at once. And it's easy to overlook things, in digital processing when you're trying to do that. It's easy to not understand what's going on inside of an actual tube amplifier to understand that. And the process that they're doing for that Arid technology, it really captures that. And that's part of the same thing I was talking about in like the very first time I got GT-1000. I had this one track that I was recording myself, and I had already tracked it a couple times just with rough guitars, and I was trying for different sounds, doing different plug-in type things, a different modeler. I even had a low volume recording with a microphone, but it wasn't sounding right. Nothing was sitting right. And the first preset I pulled up, I'm like, all right, let me just try this. And it wasn't even necessarily the tone that I was going for, but it did that thing where it just kind of, that is sitting perfectly in the mix. The rest of the mix it's commanding, it's cutting through, it's dominant without being too loud, and it's set on like any of the other 5 tracks that I had just roughly put rhythms down trying to find a tone, and it just annihilated them. None of the others could hold together. It was like at one point I was even trying to see if I get all 2 or 3 of them to blend together, or 4 of them to blend together, and none of them would sit the same way in a track. Any combination of it, and it was just clearly as if I was recording a very loud, well mic'd up amp, and that was pretty staggering for me when I first heard that. And I think the description that you're giving right now, Doug, is similar to the experience I had with that, and is that initial attack cut through is probably triggering that threshold on that trigger, because it's complex, and that threshold on that compressor and limiter that you're using is probably like responding to all that uniqueness and complexity and harmonics, and it's like, okay, I get it. All right, so and that's probably part of why it sounds totally different to you. So I'm glad that you experienced the same thing I did.
Can I pull the metal guy up for just a second? I'm going to tell you I'm going to give you a little reveal about this guy.
Sure.
I actually took the 1176 out. It actually sounded better without my candy.
That's so amazing. Hey, Andreas asked if the GT-1000 core sends audio via MIDI, via USB. Yes, it does. It will act as an audio interface. So that, and like a laptop with GarageBand even, you can plug your headphones into it. The sound from your computer can come right through it. So you can use it in real time. You can also do that with the wtih. That's another question that comes up a lot. And one of the few differences between the GT-1000 core and its bigger brother, the GT-1000 regular, the full-size one, it has the same DSP capabilities and everything like that, which is great. But it does have 2 less jacks. The GT-1000 core, the bigger brother, has the normal left-right quarter-inch outs, but it also has XLR sub-outs, and you can route to those. When you're using this thing with the USB, the sub-out still exists inside the GT-1000 core as well. So you can actually, for example, how I was telling you, you could do 4 parallel stereo paths. You could actually send different paths to the sub-outs USB into your recording device. Now, there's no way to route that to the output because there's no physical jack, but internally you still can. You can still route it to USB for recording. You can also route out a dry signal if you want to reamp later. So yeah, so it's got pretty much every capability in there, and what I tend to do is whenever I'm trying to record, I usually don't just dry and then try and reamp. I usually pick an amp tone that I like and try and build around it. But the ability to then use one of those extra routes as a dry path that I might later decide to use is just great. I'm totally into it.
Before we get to the 4.5 volts, which we will.
I love how you're hung up on that because it's really pretty simple. But we'll
I'm totally fixated on it. So I'm fixated on. I'm waiting. It's like that last little piece of dessert. We're just like, let's. Since that would be part of the pedal board thing, what I would love to do unless you have some craftier idea, which you probably do. I would like to get to a moment and talk about some of the different rigs that we would potentially set up. But let's talk about the 4.5 volt thing, because
let's get that out of the way while we
get
can.
it done.
Right? So in electronics, right, and I usually even better at DSP conversation than external analog conversation, but we'll talk external analog. When you're talking voltage, right, there's a voltage rail. So power swings positive, swings negative, just like audio swings positive and swings negative. And so when you put a 9-volt battery in your product, right, what you're really getting is 4.5 volts positive and then 4.5 volts negative. So it needs 9. So it's 9 volts total, but it's 4.5 volts peak to peak is what it's called. Right. Now, most audio products that are out there tend to do 5 volts peak to peak for a digital processor or anything like that, because that 5 volts peak to peak gives them a little bit of headroom over what your 9-volt pedal can do. Right. And they're kind of fine. One of the things that is really interesting about the GT-1000 and the GT-1000 core is they're actually 18 volts. And part of the reason that they're 18 volts is they have a full bass mode inside of them. And have you ever seen a bass with 2 9-volt batteries inside of it? A lot of their electronics come with 18-volt rails. So these things, they operate at a much higher voltage as far as the output for recording devices, right? I think it goes to plus 12 dBu, I think is the max output on it. And so it's really high voltage signal, so it works with Pro gear, and you can actually plug some voltage into it. Now, in audio, a pedal, for example, if you want to talk the Eric Johnson battery thing, pedals that 4.5 volts positive, 4.5 volts negative, as the pedal starts to lose voltage as it gets older, those start to pull in. All right, now distortion is made by clipping, and clipping is made by gain. So you take a small signal, you add gain, and push it all the way up until pushed against those rails, and you push it much further than that, and it starts to go from a sine wave to a square wave. That square wave creates harmonics. Well, if the rails pull down, then you're going to have more harmonics. You have less output, but there are more harmonics. In a tube amp, this happens dynamically, right? Whenever you hit a note, it'll go squish in, right? That is part of what we call sag. And if you're talking about the very sad and tragic story yesterday of Eddie Van Halen, his big thing in the early days was that he used a 220 volts Marshall and a Variac, and he was running at like 130, 140 volts, which takes the output level, so the amp got quieter, but it pulled the voltage rails down, creating a much more harmonic and a lot more distortion from it. So this voltage rail, whenever we're talking distortion and gain, is a key factor, whether you're talking pedals, whether you're talking like, certain Germanium diodes, they sag more, they'll pull in as you use them. Different, we talk power sag and feel on a cool amplifier, they all pull in differently on that voltage. And some things are just hard, voltage, and but it changes. And when you hear like the classic story of Eric Johnson talking about different batteries sounding different, most likely that is that the solid voltage that's coming out of it is just slightly different on one manufacturer than the next, and he's really noticing the harmonic difference on that, and that's probably what it is. And to the point of you could probably even put like a little control on your voltage. Well, in fact, I think like some of the Voodoo Lab stuff has a sag knob on it, and that's exactly what that's doing, is changing the voltage. So it's not 9 volts now, it's 8.5 volts or 8 volts, and that pulls those in and creates more distortion on your stuff. So apparently I like doing this a lot too. I gesture a lot.
You're a gesticulator.
Yes. So, but one of the really cool things about the GT-1000 is it's a much higher voltage range. So it's never clipping before it hits that 32-bit A to D. You're not getting digital clipping from your pedals that come before it. It's got plenty of headroom for anything else that you plug into it. and especially like an 18 volt for bass, because it is set up and does have bass amps and bass tones and bass stuff. And I love that because it's not a guitar product that they went, oh, let's find a way to make it work for bass. It's like from day one, it was already set up for professional bass level and stuff. And and also on the front of the GT-1000 core, which is different than its brother, it actually has 2 inputs, right? And those 2 inputs, what's nice about that is you could use it to run other things into it in stereo if you wanted to. Especially the 2 inputs works really great because the assumption is that one of those rigs, and this is where Doug was going to go in a second, is the core is capable of so much that it might take you a moment to wrap your head around it, and different people are going to use it in different ways. Doug is giving you examples of the amp tones that are inside of it going direct, and that's a beautiful way to use it, and it's totally awesome. Sit it right on your desk, plug it into the DAW, and go for it all day long. But we also assume that because of the size and form factor and what we're seeing people do, that we want people to incorporate it with their favorite pedals and put it on their pedal board. So it can be, pedal 6, 7, or 8, and you can have that last pedal right before it be stereo, plug into it, maintain your stereo image, and then either use that now as a way to get into your DAW. Imagine taking your pedal board, and now you've got your entire pedal board routes right into that, and then take it straight out into your DAW via USB or something like that. Or imagine taking that straight to the PA system, because so many people are in ear monitors now. Just imagine I got my 6, 8 favorite pedals. They're all routed. They're all talking. I love my tone. Goes right in this guy, and it's giving me all those other things that I need. It doesn't have to be everything. I have a favorite distortion pedal, right? But for that third song in the gig, I need a Leslie. So it's my Leslie, right, when I need it. That kind of thing. It could be that catch-all for everything else. So stereo in, stereo out to the board if you wanted to. Or, as I was telling you earlier, you can use the outputs, either the effect sends or the right-left outputs. And there's ways to route it into different ways so that it could go feed my amp using the aired setting and revoicing my amp. I could bypass the amp tones inside of it and just use it as an effects pedal. So you've got 22 effects that are available in parallel series, however you want to run them, and just drive the front of my amplifier. Or, because of all the routing inside of it, I could actually split that in 2 and drive effects to my live rig, and then send amp tones and cabinet sims and everything straight out to the house. So it can do everything in parallel. Was that a lot?
That was a lot, but good. That's good a lot. So
Hi, I'm Jeff. I talk too much.
No. Between the two, actually, we get along really well considering how chatty we are.
I know.
So
that's always been amazing.
I love that. No. So I was actually, the funny thing is, as I was fiddling around, I think this is the sound that I had. So, it's always dangerous to pull up a live demo and just go for it. But you know what? It actually makes it that much more fun. So it was up in the bass end of things. Where'd Bass Cloud mysteriously go to now? Now I'm up. Well, there we go. Oh, there it is. So. Right, there we go. Hang on, let me go full frame here. Of course, Genius here forgot to mute the mic, but the point being is there's all sorts of crazy stuff, and that's a bass preset.
Yes, there are a ton of crazy things in there because you can get into, Some of the delay sounds that we've got in there, they're really ethereal, but they've got a lot of stuff that's going on inside of them because they come from the Terra Echo side of there. Which Terra Echo, it has this thing where like the harder you play, you'll hear echoes speed up or slow down based on amplitude and stuff like that. You've got overtone sounds in there, which can sound like an organ, which is just great.
Crazy.
You can do things in parallel. You can even split things. Those little dividers, which can split your signal into 2 pass, and then you can put pass inside a pass, which Aaron. Aaron refers to it as putting a taco inside of a taco inside of a taco. So you can put those inside there. Can tell we live in LA and like Mexican food. But you can actually do things like you can dynamically put a dynamic block on either one of those, so that as you play soft, one of them is playing, and you play hard, the other one is playing. You can put switch on it, so it switches back and forth between the two things. So you can have 2 presets within one preset. You can even set them up in a crossover, so that, like, high frequencies go to one amp and tone, and low frequencies go to another. And those aren't other blocks. Like we say, there's 24 blocks in there, but you could really start looking into things like within the dividers, there's EQ and splitting functions. And one of the things that Doug and I were tripping out on earlier is there's a spread function. When you split it into stereo, you can actually split those and make them even wider by some kind of phase cool trick in there, and it's super wide.
Seriously, dude. Like, it sounds.
That really mellowed me out.
It's like so. It's kind of some green. No, green tea's got a bunch of caffeine. Which is the tea that makes you go to sleep? Chamomile. It's like a cup of chamomile tea.
A nice cup of chamomile, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's like I'm listening to that through like little earbuds, right? And just the stereo imaging that's going on is amazing. For those of you at home, Doug has the ability to do stereo, and the editor that I'm flying in to be video-wise doesn't allow me to be stereo, so we're letting him play, which, I won't play, but because he's a much better guitar player, but I am a little envious right now.
Well, the good news is that do you know what preset that is?
No.
So that's crystal. Oh, look at this. Hold on. All right. What is that? 5? There we go. Crystal Clouds. That is just. I mean, so just my number one thing that I use as a barometer for a piece of gear is like, do I just start creating music the moment I plug into it, right?
Yep.
That's kind of like, does the needle go music, or does it go I suck? Like, it's a funny thing, about tube amps. I'll rabbit trail there for just a moment. Like a tweed will put hair on your chest. Like, that is an amplifier until you start to really turn it up. Chris, this is this is exactly Chris is like, this is the whole thing. That patch alone is enough to make me want to buy the unit, right? Like, right, I mean, that is
Thanks, Chris.
I mean, like, you know, and for me, it was kind of the Metallica-esque kind of dual rec, kind of like, I'm like, you know, because it's, and there's, you just kind of go, I can write X number of songs with that sound. And, you know, and, you know, for those of us that are, again, Holdsworth, another guy, you know, that whole kind of, you know, those crazy. Not very Holdsworthy, but the point being, it was still kind of cool. But you know, those. So the double swells, right? That was classic Holdsworth. And listen to that.
Right. And there's a bunch of great presets in there. You know, an old Boss classic was the what is it? The swelling pedal,
The auto swell.
slow gear.
Slow gear, sorry,
slow
my bad.
gear. Slow, yeah. Right. And slow gear is in there, right? So that, you know, there's a bunch of classics in there, like the feedbacker is in there as well. Right. I've made a bunch of great presets where it's like I'll do a slow gear into a feedbacker, and it's just these just gorgeous things you can do, you know. And that's why I keep saying this. It's like it really comes down to if you can kind of imagine it, it's kind of available there. If you do open up the product and you're like I'm not sure where to go, you know, it might take you a little bit to wrap it around because there's so many possibilities. Like if you wanted to, if you were a bass player, you know, the band Royal Blood. Right, they kind of, you know, kicked on the scene a few years ago, and it was that whole like the bass players playing a guitar amp with an octaver on it, and then a bass amp at the same time. Yeah, well, and it's like you can do a parallel path, have it a bass amp on one side, a guitar amp on the other side, do an octave up on the one side, and totally nail that. Right. There's even patches in there where the crossover that's on the divider is putting like most of your sub frequencies on one path, so like all your lower notes, which if you haven't had another product we need to talk about at some point in time, we just came out with a new, you know, there used to be the OC5 for years, and everybody used to say you'd love the OC2. Last month we also announced the OC5, right? So there's OC2, OC3, and now the OC5. And one of the features on is it will do a sub octave on only the lowest note in the chord. So if you want to do like a jazz thing with like only like a walking bass line, the guitar part will remain the same, and then the bass part will do just the low note. And because the crossover function, there's even a preset inside GT-1000 which gets pretty close to that, right? So you can do an octave on one side, put a crossover on it, so it's like everything from, you know, 150 hertz and below goes to 1 amp tone, which you've got an octaver on, and then everything else goes to the other one, and so it pretty much will do that kind of thing anyways. So yeah, it's pretty fun.
Genius. All right, Andre, so Jeff, you and I were talking about kind of the foot switch functionality. So Andre, I don't know if you can see that there, but can you assign clean crunch lead to foot switches 1, 2, and 3, for example, if you're at a crunch, and clicking in the same foot switch, you're at 2, assign a solo boost, for example. So we were talking about ganging multiple functions to a single foot switch, which is kind of a corollary to what he's talking about, I think, or he's asking that about ganging. What can you walk through what you can do with the? Hang on. So we're talking about.
Let me break it down a little bit from its bigger brother first, and then we'll move into this. So the bigger brother DT-1000. DT-1000, when you walk up to it, it's like most products when you first look at it, it's in a preset type mode, right? There's lots of switches on it, and they're meant so you can go, I'm on bank 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's changing the entire preset. There is inside there 2 other modes, one which allows you to kind of bank up and down, but have some on-off ability on all the stomp boxes that are inside of there. And then a third mode where it becomes just stomp box switches. And so it's just a pedal board at that point in time. It's not about going to preset 2. It's like, this is my pedal board and everything is on and off. You can do that functionality inside of this, but obviously it doesn't have as many switches. So you're going to probably want to assign, 2 things to one button or another. So if you wanted to, you could do like for the thing that he was just suggesting, you could set up button 1, 2, 3 to be, amp 1, then amp 2, and then a solo boost switch for amp 2 if you wanted to. That at the same time, that third switch not only makes it louder, but maybe you add an EQ, make it a little more mid-rangey so it cuts through, or a little brighter so it cuts through. At the same time, you turn on a delay, for example, that kind of thing, right? So there's no limit to things. If you go into the menu, you can set the CTL control number 1, and you can add external controls if you want, right? So you can add some more of them to switch anything on or off. And there are certain effects inside of there, like if you're on one of the delays, there's a warp mode which holds it in a loop, so you can kind of play over it and kind of get that just the that classic just hold a sustain a chord while you play over it, kind of. A place that I like it is there's a pitch function, and there's a couple presets in there where you set it an octave high and you hit the button, and you can set the ramp time. It goes right, so it's almost like using a wah pedal. You can of course sign an external expression pedal to do that as well, but you just on off. So it's very easy to take a single preset and set it so it's 1, 2, 3, and it's like sound 1, sound 2, sound 3, with everything that's inside of there, right? And at the same time, one button turns something on. It can also turn off other things, which is important, because I could have it so that I hit button 2 and it told it to turn on, and then button 3 says turn that off. And so pretty much I think what you're asking, it can do. It'll take you a few minutes to wrap your head around how to do it, but it's not that hard. And once you do it once or twice, you're like, oh, this is really, really, really easy. And what's funny is if you guys ever get a chance to talk to any of our other guys in Boss, there's Aaron, Austin, who Doug knows very well. And then there's also David, what sometimes we call him Moki, who's in customer support, which some of you guys have probably talked to. Months ago, I walked in to customer support when we were actually at work. And, and Moki's had his GT-1000, the full one, set up, and it was like changed all the buttons. So it's like this one's preset up down, this one's effect pedal on off, this one is tap tempo, this one, and he just had this like gorgeous layout that seemed so complex, but it was like everything all in one. And so it again, it falls into that, if you can think of it, it can probably do it. Because they didn't leave any limitations. Everything can be assigned to everything. So I think you could absolutely do what you're talking about, Andre. So that was a long way of saying yes.
I'm heading over. There we go. So what you're looking at right now, when you first start hanging out with this guy, can be a little freaky as you're kind of walking through here. But what that basically is just replicating is the signal chain that you're seeing here, Ski.
Hey, Doug.
Yes.
Doug, if you don't mind, can we go back to that the unit, and let me just show people how to get into the very first page kind of thing, like on the physical unit?
Absolutely. So,
okay. So exit out. Exit. There you go. So first off, when you walk up to it, what Doug has right now, it says Crystal Clouds. The exit button over there, Doug, can you scroll that to the left? So hit the button on the upper left. Okay. So there's 3 different views that you can see here. There's where it just says the number, big, and the name of the preset small. Page 1 to the right. So he can see it a little bit smaller. Page 1 more to the right. You can see which patches are turned, what's happening with the foot switches right there. And so in Andre's question right there, you could see on that patch what you assigned to anything. Page 1 more to the right. I love how you see the signal flow. But let's go all the way to the left again, Doug. Hey, Andrew. right? So if we just want to scroll up and down, on the right-hand side, on the very top, you see the output level. But down below that, the next knob is the one that says select. This is your main tool for getting around. So I don't want to screw up Doug's preset, but if you turned it one to the right, we'll okay.
Sorry.
And if you go back up one, so that's the basic way to just move up and down. There are 250 user presets and 250 built-in presets. And now if we want to edit that, if you hit the effects button, we can see the signal flow that Doug's got going on there. So that's the signal flow that's going on. And then Doug, for fun, turn the select knob twice to get on top of that CMP. Okay, that's the compressor, right, which is an X-type compressor. Right now it's off. If you push the button, it turns it on. If you want to move that somewhere in the signal chain, Doug, can you just push and turn it to the right? And now you've moved it somewhere else. There you go. That's pretty much how you edit this thing. So it's pretty easy to get around. And then as you can see, there's 5 knobs underneath that. And wherever you are, the text that's on the bottom of the screen correlates the knob that's underneath it. So if he wanted to change that, you know, right now it says, I can't, oh, that's the effects loop on off. Okay. And you can move those effects loops wherever you want. And that's how you can get into a 4-cable method or a 7-cable method. And then if you also look right above the number 3, if you look really close, you can see 3 little dots.
Oops.
So that means there's other pages. So page to the right, and you can see other parameters within that tone that he's got selected there. So, and that's about it. All right. When it comes to editing a preset, move those around, and even that little divider where it sees the number 1, you can grab that divider and you can move dividers into dividers, and that's how you get the parallel paths inside of parallel paths kind of thing. And while they look mono, if you put a stereo effect in them, they become stereo.
How do I? Oh.
Yeah, you just moved it. There you go.
No, I
totally screwing up your sound. I'm proud of you.
Oh, I am moving it, but how do I? Okay, so all right, so hang on. Let me.
Do you want to put a taco inside a taco?
So the taco inside the taco. How do we put the taco inside? All right, so just so you guys know what we're talking about, practical usage for why we want to put a taco inside a taco. Let's go back to Phil Collins. He wants to make, maybe the front of house guy loves that amp model that I love in there. So he's like, just give me that. But Phil wants to have all this nested stuff that he's got a stereo rig. Maybe wants, for example, let me hear the CE fill in the blank pure chorus on one side of a stereo field in his local mix. So, you know, and as you know, as we were talking about earlier, every single one of these paths, even when it splits off like that, there's still a stereo path if you put a stereo device in there. So you now have the ability to have multiple stereo paths happening at the same time. All right, take it away, Einstein.
Do you have the ability to go to preset bank 1, number 2? It's the second preset.
If I can,
and it's called Shimmer Reverb.
I'm sorry, which preset?
Number 2.
Numero dos. Absolutely.
Deep shimmer. There you go. Okay, now if you go to the effect, and then scroll to the right a little bit with your selector without moving anything. Sorry, the selector knob. Go a little further. You might want to pull this up on your editor. It'll be easier for everybody to see. But
there we go.
There you go.
There's the taco in a taco.
Yep, there's paths inside of paths.
And what's kind of cool is you're sitting here, and what's neat is you can see, like, there's, if you're on a mobile device, I apologize, you may not be able to see it, but basically you're seeing on the lower taco, the 2 rows of the lowest taco, we're basically, and I'll illuminate it and do it. Now it'll go to the lower line, so it just kind of goes from left to right, top to bottom. So there's a logic to the way it works, and honestly, it's pretty straightforward. And then you just kind of move along. So you were gonna say, Jeff?
Well, first off, I think we're probably, you know, there's the nice official name of it called a divider, and we've now just called it a taco permanently, right? So I'm glad that everybody's got that experience. Yeah, but it could be, you can move speaker cabinets into those. You can move like the output into those as well. So for example, if you wanted to, you could put the output on that bottom fourth thing, and the sound would shoot out right after that, which is great when you're using the its big brother for the sub out path that it has on it. Have, for some of the 4 cable method stuff that I've been doing, I've actually been using the effects send as my way to work with the amplifier, and so I would just put its output right there, and then still have the stereo output going, further down the line with the cabinet sim.
Oh, wait. Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping in. That's how you could use it as an amp switcher.
Yes.
You
well,
you could set up multiple paths and use your sends and go to multiple amplifiers using your effects send and just never bring the return back. But you could choose which amp you're targeting and where you place it. Let me back up a step. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about a switcher is that it usually will give you the opportunity to place not only the main outputs, which Jeff talked about moving a moment ago, but also your sends. And there are some devices that you have to have a return coming back into. It wants to see that. Like I was talking about that Marshall amplifier. They didn't want to let me use the power amp in without having an input on the front end of the amplifier. The point being is what that gives you the ability to do is tap a signal out to multiple amplifiers and use this on a preset by preset basis, or with something like the Morningstar if you need a couple of extra buttons to be, or with the FS2, I think it's called.
Yes.
And that would
FS 5, 6, and 7 are the more modern ones.
And don't forget the hyphen, because if it's a boss item, it's got to have a hyphen.
Absolutely.
Just saying. So the point being is that means that you can kind of tap off at whatever point you want. Not only that, if you did it on a preset by preset basis, it means that you could have lots of options of what you wanted to send to your JVM or your Plexi Marshall or to your Vibreverb. So you could actually just kind of go, okay, in my home studio, I'm going to have 4 amps that I'm always going to connect to. I'm not going to do it as a 4 cable method. It allows me to use this as basically a mini amp switcher, so long as you're not getting ground loops. And I know Mason at Vertex doesn't like the Hum X, but I have no problem with the Hum X. The Hum X has saved my posterior many a time, and I love Mason dearly, but he was like, not a fan. I love the Hum X, and pretty much. If I'm hooking up a pair of amplifiers, I'm usually using at least one. Jeff, you were saying.
So a couple things. One, you're absolutely right. You could, in theory, for example, take effect send 1 to one amp, effect send 2 into another amp, and then the right-left output to a third amp or a pair of amps, and just use it as a switcher back and forth. Now, one of the really, really cool things is that brings me up to is number one, you will probably, in a lot of cases, run into ground loops issues with that. A thing that most people don't know about the GT-1000 and GT-1000 core is that the engineers anticipated to have ground loop situations because they kept seeing people on tour, and they would have ground loop switchers for people that would walk up with their pedal board or their multi-effects processor, put on the front of stage, and it has 1 voltage from the front of the stage, and then 30 foot back is the amp they're running to, and there's a ground lift because they're both on different phases. There is 6 or 8 grounding options in the output modes, and it will change the grounding possibilities inside of it to try and cancel it out so you don't have to use an external device or an isolation transformer. All right. So that is a brilliant piece of live studio use, usage that not everybody will use, but the pros that are using it, it will just save their butt 100 times.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Wazatube Amp Expander.
Mm-hmm.
This box and the GT stuff, which I've used for a bunch of time. When did you guys get so smart? I mean, like, it's like that's a lot of kind of like gig smarts, and and I say that because people think of Boss, they think of not a 500 series pedal, they think of a blues driver, they think of a
Hmm.
TU2. Um, there's a lot of and the Wazatube Amp Expander is just as Richard attested to before, is an absurd piece of technology.
Hmm.
It's was this like 10 years ago? You were like, hey, we did the SD 3000. That was in every and still is pretty much in every major recording studio in the world. You walk in, there's
Hmm.
still one in the rack. Even if the SPX 90 is long gone, that somebody in that room still is like, well, I'm not getting rid of the SD 3000. Sorry, it's staying.
Hmm.
The lexicons, the PCMs gone. SD 3000 still hanging out in there. So,
Hmm.
was there a point strategically that you guys kind of went, you know what? We don't want to just be, we loved selling 1 million or 2 million stomp boxes, which isn't a bad thing to celebrate.
No.
But that's a very different mentality than what that box. Gosh, I'm going to learn how to do this one day. That box right there does.
Yes, so there's a couple things that I think happen. One, the engineers that are at Boss, the entire team there, I just love those guys. One, they're just great human beings and fun to hang out with, and they're just smart as hell. And I think they were allowed to be unleashed. When Yoshi Ikigami became president of Boss 6 years ago or something like that, he was an engineer. He'd been there for 30 some years doing stuff, and I think he knew what he could see, what he wanted to do, and what some of the other engineers were capable of doing. And I think he really just, encouraged and empowered and had his own ideas and really wanted to bring a new sense of like, that's when the Waza pedals came out, right? Like kicking them up a notch. Go ahead, let's reinvent them a little bit. They'd been working on amps for years, and I think he's rolled up his sleeves and said, let's do this right. We know amps, let's do that. Something like the wtih, funnily, is not actually a product that they started developing as a product. It was a tool set that they developed for studying amplifiers. That's how they came up with the Blues Cube amplifiers. That's how they came up with the Katana amplifiers. And then it's like, well, we got this really cool stuff over here. Can't this be? So I remember when I got hired 4 years ago, I go over to Japan, and I stayed there for 3 months. And and the engineers at the time, had these metal boxes, and each of these metal boxes, it would say like, greenback, 16 ohm, and I'm like, what's that, right? And vintage 30 8 ohm, and you're like, well, what are these boxes? And they had designed these boxes to isolate the sound so they could study it. Now, I have a lot of sound design experience and stuff like that for years. And one of the classic problems that I used to complain about any other company's sound design was that they would put them on dummy loads, and a dummy load doesn't have the impedance response and doesn't feed back and doesn't have a reactive load. And there's reactive loads, and then there's true reactive loads. And there's different how true is your reactive load kind of experiences. So my thing was always, I'd just blast the amp. I'd put it through speakers, and right, like literally, I cannot tell you how many times I would have earplugs in and gun muffs on top of my head, right? And you'd be playing like white noise through something or whatever, which you'd be amazed how much sound you get through your mouth. But anyways, right? Um, so I was always I understood that there was a relationship there, and I wanted to keep that. But these guys understood what that relationship was, how that relation happened, what was going on there. And they built these tools for themselves. Well, once they had those tools for themselves, they were really capable of going, well, we made it for ourselves. Can't we make something else? And it's so funny because Kosuke, who was head of the engineering team, my first interview, so I interview with corporate people here in America, and they introduced me via phone, this video call with Yoshi Ikigami, and Yoshi's like, I want to meet him, right? And they're like, Jeff, what are you doing next week? I'm like, right. They're like, okay, we're going to Nashville with Summer Nam, so I flew to Nashville. They flew me to Nashville to interview with them.
Hold on.
And Kosuke,
Were there scooters involved?
were there scooters involved? Not that time, no.
Okay, just checking.
Right, right. Yeah, but I meet Yoshi and we had a really good meeting and stuff like that. And then Kosuke, he started basically like just brainstorming with me, and it was his idea to take these. He really wanted to make something, and what he was describing to me at the time, which he probably shouldn't have because I wasn't technically hired at the time, but good things, good things. He was describing to me what would become the wtih and how he's got these tools, and he wanted to. Right, and just there's a level of amp excitement, there's pedal excitement. The team right now is just, they're in love with what they do. A lot of people have this idea that maybe Roland and Boss, it's like this corporate company and stuff like that, and they're not. They're nerdy guys like you and I talking gear, and you walk by everybody's desk, like everybody's desk in the office, all the engineers, they all got a guitar sitting right there, right? And at lunch there's like 6 sound rooms, and somebody always makes a beeline for that, and you hear plinking going on, and there's like all these like whittly, and then you go over somebody else's desk and you see a Boss pedal, and it's got like all these modifications that are sticking on it, and it's like, is that what are we making? And it's like, oh no, I made this for myself. Right? So they love the gear, they love what they're doing, and I think about 6 years ago or something like that, they were just empowered to do, kind of reinvent themselves and unleash and let go. And they did. And so we're seeing a wealth of just different things than we had seen previous years. Right. And they understand tone like I never, I don't think the outside world really understands that they do. They understand engineering on like I think people understand that they do. And they've got the chops for it. I mean, something like the GT-1000 core, that amount of processing power, that foresight sight for the switching and the power supply and all the things that we need to have it do. It's if you made a laundry list of I want something that does things, I think they've hit about 50 more laundry list points than I could have thought of. So
I'll beat up on poor Carvin. Not for the sake of beating up on him, but there was a period of time that Carvin released a Floyd. This would have been like 80s, 90s. And being an American company, they thought they would be American and make it such that it took an Allen wrench that was in inches and not in metrics. And it basically meant that if you were the poor Carvin guitar player that showed up on the gig with all your other guitars, and you happened to forget the Allen wrench for your American Floyd, licensed Floyd for your Carvin, you were fill in the blank OL, which was, there are things that companies do sometimes that they're not always looking ahead going, wait a second, what's going to happen when the person ends up on the gig with this? What I think is very smart about this, and again, it's funny, I made this analogy earlier, and as many people know, I'm friendly in all camps, because that's a very judicious thing to do in a business where, first of all, the moving chairs factor. First of all, just about. I'm sorry, I should have known this. Did you work at Digi?
No, I did not work at Digi. Right.
Okay.
I have. I've done things. That I worked at Line 6. I worked at Lesis before that. After Line 6, I did some work for a company called Sound Machine, which did some plugins for Universal Audio. So like the Tube Screamer, Big Muff, I did those. Also, I did some pedals for Dunlop. I did the Echoplex pedal for Dunlop and the Reverb pedal for Dunlop.
Slacker.
Yeah, well, apparently I like doing delays. First I did Deal 4, then I had to come back and do that. So I keep going back to Echoplexes for some reason. Apparently I like them.
And I think I asked you this. You did the Echoplex delay, but not the preamp. Is that correct, or did you both do both?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I did basically the sound design and layout of the DSP, type stuff. Like the signal flow. Sat there and studied a bunch of Echoplexes and then put that into that guy. So yeah, I did all the DSP based stuff for those guys, along with Chris Daniel and Patrick O'Connor, who I think you might know both those guys from our previous days. All right. Yeah, it was a great team of stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty, yeah. So there was a period of time. Well, there's a period of time now that with you being one of the few exceptions, that like a disproportionate number of the people that are kind of at the upper echelon of the gear business all work to Digi, like just like a
Yes.
disproportionate number of people came out of the Digi University. Sorry,
Uh-huh.
Avid, Digi Design. Now, the other thing is we started talking about TAE, and there may be somebody out there that actually doesn't know what the heck is a TAE. It's just like, I hate to say it. Melissa and I were like, what's GOAT? Like, because that was out a lot in the past couple of days, and we're like, oh, okay. But the point being, the train of thought has completely left me. Gosh, I hate when that happens. Where was I going?
Right. Well, you're saying that the industry definitely is
No, I remember.
a bunch of moving chairs.
The Wazatube Amp Expander. Thank you. So it had nothing to do with what you just said, but that reminded me. So the Wazatube,
But it was still a trigger.
It was a trigger. It got me there. Thank you very much, Trigger. That was the horse sign, by the way. I'm supposed to bounce here like that. So the deal is, the Wazatube Amp Expander is a reactive load, but rather than just being a set reactive load, it is kind of like we were talking about the way the GT-1000 core and the GT-1000 are set to interact with whatever device they're set to interact with. The interactivity between the speaker output of an amp like a Plexi Marshall or a JSX or a JVM or a Legacy or the Vibreverb, they all behave differently. They all are expected to see ideally the speaker with which they were designed to go into, because the person designing the amplifier kind of went that cabinet, that speaker, and then they kind of did some tuning to make it sound and feel good. So when you picked it up, you went like, there it is. So the Wazatube Amp Expander has a series of selectable Delios on the front, resonance and presence, that are designed with various settings to reflect the interactivity of what's happening in the resonance and the presence, which is having to do with stuff that's beyond my pay grade. But it makes it feel and respond like the proper amplifier power amp speaker relationship that it was designed. In many ways, it's kind of a classic Boss thing going back to like the GT6, where you're actually choosing the output mode because the output mode is changing the way the box is actually doing what it does, because it knows it's going into a PA or a 112 combo, or the return of a 212 combo, or the return of a stack. And that's something that Boss has been doing for a long time. And, just for the fizz and giggles, you wouldn't necessarily want to do it there. But with the GT6, and Dot X, sometimes it was cool to just try the wrong one and kind of go, what does it sound like?
Right. Yeah, as you were saying, because the impedance of the amplifier actually rechanges how your presence knob, the frequency response of that is the impedance of the speaker. So if you use a different impedance, it acts differently. Your transformer is different. Everything is different, right? So, yeah, and that device, unlike a lot of the devices that are reactive loads, it gave you 16 options, so you can plug it in and actually make the cabinet and amp work as if it's connected to the thing that it was designed to be, or mismatch it, or more importantly, not only the cabinet you're trying to play through physically, because one of the great things about the wtih is that everything you do in it comes through the live cabinet, including effects, delays, reverb, and stuff like that. But if you're loading IRs or using the cabs inside of it, when you go to record, I can take, my Marshall head, pull up an AC30 cabinet simulation, but then I can make the impedance of the transformer on my Marshall think it's connected to that same 212 Vox cabinet, which means that it's distorting and its presence knob is working a little bit different. It shifts the whole amplifier's feel to kind of a match what you would expect for the frequency response of the cabinet. So a lot of devices have IRs or cabinet simulations on them, but it doesn't do anything backwards for the amplifier, right? This actually makes the amplifier pretend as if it's connected to whatever you've selected. And it's not a massive difference. It's one of those great subtleties. It's like your hand notices it sometimes before your ear does, and your hand goes, "Whoa, wait a second," right? And it's beautiful.
Well, the other part of it is you begin to think about some of the classic mismatches, quote unquote, a basement in a Marshall 412. Like that's a classic, and a basement is Marshally to begin with, but that I remember seeing Paul McCartney in 1976, and Jimmy McCullough was his rhythm guitar player, and he was playing the basement into the Marshall, and I thought that looked really cool. I was too young to really understand anything other than I was like, that looks cool.
That looks cool. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, and most people don't realize that the first Marshalls, the JT-45 actually is identically a basement as far as the circuit board. And at the same time, even the front panel lines up knob for knob with an actual basement, right? They were just that close. So it's pretty freaking cool. But one of the big differences is when they were trying to design it for that speaker cabinet, the impedance and how they're adjusting the amount of negative feedback from the amplifier is one of the tone characters that made a Marshall, right? So, yes, there was the tube difference, which most people think that, Marshalls were all based on EL34s, but the first Marshalls were actually KT66s, which I'm a huge fan of, right? And, so I love those JT-45s. But yeah, that ability to put them, different cabinet selections, the different speakers. I mean, if it wasn't for the, the early greenback speakers versus the basement speakers, what a huge difference.
Well, the funny thing is that what people also don't know is it was just what parts they could get. Like they were in the UK, they're like, that's what's available. It's kind of like all those wahs back there. They're all flipping a little different because the Italians were like, it's just a wah to me.
This is what we got.
It's what we got. Let's sell it. It's kind of funny. All right, there we go. New comments. Hold on a second here. There we go. I love it. And this is why I have used Boss products. There we go. Little love from David.
Thanks,
Thank
David.
you so much. Andrew. Hey, Andrew's saying hi, by the way. You probably saw that.
Hi,
Jeff.
Andrew. Yeah.
So,
hey, man. Good to see you.
And then he had a funny comment about the ambience. Oh, I'm on a different preset.
Yeah. Are you on that preset number 2 I told you to go to for? And then you move.
All right, this
a couple
is
things
exactly
around,
what I'm talking about. The moment I heard, instant music, like literally, and that's the thing. It's a funny thing. Imagine that I'm going to rabbit trail a little bit. The moment I
Really?
hear it, I hear a sound. Like I can hear a sound, and I hear a progression drawn from the sound, and it's a fascinating thing. And that's kind of what my last couple of days have been like with this box. I'm like, oh, there's that tone. And it's just like bang, 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 bang. And the funny thing is the last time that happened was actually with that little Princeton over there. And, and when that happens, I will say this. I basically am like, I have to own that piece of gear. Like, whatever piece of gear it is, it's the gateway to tone.
Well, and that explains your house right there.
Well, you could say that,
Wonderful person. Right, and putting up with you makes you even more wonderful, right, because you've got such an amazing collection of gear, and it's awesome to see, right? But I don't know if everybody realizes like your ability to pick up a sound and just like vibe with it and go off in the first place. I've seen you do it on many occasions. Like one of the best ones for me was like remember last year at Summer NAMM?
That was a lot of
You were
fun.
kind of you were kind of tired and you were kind of like and you're like, can I just sit down and noodle for a second? I'm like sure, why not, right? And I think we were playing a Morgan through a Wazatube through some type of 412 cabinet. It may have been that or that plexi I had there, that vintage plexi, either one, right? And I've heard yet a whole other side of you, but and just to see you like relax and get comfortable and play, it's like you know, always amazed at your guitar playing ability, Doug. Right?
Well, you know, given who you are, what you do, and the fact that you can play the daylights out of the guitar as well, always appreciated. And that was a lot of fun because it was you and me, and then Stan Cody came over. So like I was with two of my favorite geeks, geeking out on gear. So I'm just like, oh, this is great. I was the best. I was the happiest book in the library being bookended by you guys. And that was a great tone. I don't remember what, I think it was something that you had the power amp section just ganked, and it was a Les Paul, and I
think that's my Les Paul. It's right there. You were playing,
and I did my my cost thing. So so once you actually figure out what my deal is, there's a reason I was one of the guys that did Guitar Hero, was that I'm a better parrot than I am a eagle. You know, like bald eagles, they are iconic. They are their own thing. Where parrots, like, they learn to mimic, and they're constantly listening for little things. And the thing is, people are amused and entertained. Are you not entertained? They are entertained by parrots. So that particular day, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go into Cost World. So that's, that my whole little Cost thing. I'm like, I'll go there, and people mistake my pseudo Cost for me, and I'm fine with that because I'm so enamored with those players. I'm happy to do that now. And the great thing about, I'm going to make another record, so I'm going to get a chance to find out how little I can sound like other people while sounding a lot like all the people that I love, which is going to be an interesting endeavor. But that was so much fun.
Yes, it was a great time. Sadly, we didn't get to do that again this summer.
No,
but
I did meet Yoshi that night too. Because we went out. I did not do the scooter riding with you guys, but we went out to that rib place and hung out in the back.
We never did do the scooter riding, but yeah, as has occurred on many occasions, I may have had some tequila and was trying to get everybody to race them at one point. Yes, right. I'm a bad influence at sometimes.
I was actually not partaking of the tequila nor the mopeding. I actually, you're a braver man than I am, because I'm just like, you know what, these guys, I am really careful. Like, I'll just leave it at that. But I was if we're gonna go to confession here, I'm just gonna admit my juvenile love for Jackass. Those movies satisfy my inner delinquent child on a level that it is vicarious in the worst way, because those guys are just pranksters. And it's, so I said it. It's out there.
Fall Guy Down Funny.
Yeah, no, they are. So, man. Okay, hang on. That's a great question to Chris Stark, asking about the synergy.
Okay. That list of amps is optimized to connect is killer. Oh, awesome. Thanks. Is there an option for a synergy amp? I didn't see that in there off the top of my head. But what you do find usually is that if it doesn't have your specific amp that you're going through, there's usually one that's pretty close to it that you can find, just find a tone that you know really well. and kind of go through until you find one that matches up with it. And then if we get some enough requests for it, then we'll do a good job about trying to make sure that the engineers know and that they try and do an update for it later on. So if we're getting requests for things, we'll try and put that in. One of the things that, classic old school Boss was, we put out a product and it was released, it was done. And in the past couple of years, especially with products like the GT-1000, you keep seeing every couple months we do, various updates and add some things. So, we'll put anything you guys want on the list, see if it's doable, and see if the team can apply it, and hopefully it'll come up in the future. But I don't think it is natively on there. But I'm also not looking at the list. I'm just doing off the top of my head.
I'm looking at it. I'm not seeing it, but you'll find something that's like it. But yes.
Yeah, but usually if you find something that's in the vein of, and the first place I would start for in the vein of is the speaker cabinet and the tube type, right? Most people don't really realize how much of the character of their amplifier starts with the power amp section. All the classic amps that you love, it's all about clipping the power tubes. That's where the first distortion point is. Most people think it's the front tube. It's actually the last tube. And so, if it's an EL34 type thing, like a Marshall or something like that, start there. If it's a, EL84, start there. Just look through the list and find something that's kind of in the vein of between the tube type that it would be for the power amp tube and the speaker cabinet. And you're usually going to be kind of in the ballpark right off the bat. So hopefully that gets you there quickly. And then if it's desired by a lot of people, we'll see if we can shake down the engineers and make it happen.
I love that. We are approaching the end of the second hour, and you and I, over the next couple of days, I think we're going to do a little bit of video, something or other. So I want to be judicious about your time, because I'm going to be monopolizing it, monopolizing it or something, or monopolizing it.
Coined a phrase. Well, then maybe we should just ask anybody if they have any last minute questions that we can do. Let's try and get those answered as best as possible. I love that everybody's been responding, and because we have been here for 2 hours, so I'm not sure I could go all night. But
ditto. Dang it. Bueller.
Well, again, so the kind of quick cover, let's do like a little overview again. The GT-1000 core is not a reduced version of a GT-1000. It is a GT-1000 in a smaller box. The only big obvious thing is going to be, the number of switches and buttons and stuff on it. It's got 2 less jacks, which are the XLR, because they're instead of the quarter-inch and XLR, it's got just the quarter-inch and not the XLR. Although virtually through the USB for recording DSP, it does have the aux outs as well. It can act as an audio interface and has aired technology, which is really dynamic and feels really great. It does do IR loading if anyone wants to download their own cabinets and IRs in it. And, but the big thing is it's got 24 simultaneous effects that are always running. You can turn them off, but they're always there ready to go. You're never going to run into an out of memory or anything kind of message. They're playing, they're ready to go, and makes for fast switching times. It also makes for no frustration because you want to turn something on and it's not there. It's there. If you see it, it's available. And and it's just a really great product. The idea of the product, the smaller footprint was started from the idea that it should go probably at the end of your pedal board. So incorporate it into your existing pedal boards, and it has 2 effect sends. So you can do, some loops out to your pedal board or just have it stereo at the end and it catches everything. You can use the amp modes if you want, or you can not use the amp modes. You can just use it as an effects processor. As I said, it does 4 stereo parallel pass, and they can be routed in different outputs and things like that. So you can literally run dual stereo amps. You can send effects to a live amplifier on stage while you send amp tones to the PA simultaneously. So there's pretty much a lot of things that you can do. If you can think of it, it can do it. And it's, one of the things that definitely triggered Doug on it, besides the dynamics and feel, which is that aired technology, which is the augmented impulse response dynamics, is how it feels and how it cuts through a track. But one of the other things that was one of the simpler things is just the actual power supply capabilities of it. It's something like 650 milliamps, normal barrel jack for a DC connector, so it's 9 volt. So it's going to work on pretty much any power supply you have is already pretty close to handling it. It obviously comes with a power supply, but if you want to try and use like something that's going to power multiple pedals on your board or daisy chain it, it should work with that, and that's going to be really convenient. We did discuss tonight, several of the things that it's very convenient for. It is also got bass amp tones in it, and it runs at 18 volts, so it works with high-end bass amps. Doug's waving his hand for the question.
It has MIDI in and out, but the new trend in MIDI is to run MIDI over a 1/4 inch or a what size is this? Is the MIDI jack on this?
It's an 1/8 inch MIDI plug. So just like the one I'm using for connecting my headphones to my computer, it's just a TRS 1/8 inch MIDI plug. If you guys don't know, this Boss has been making some amazing cables, guitar cables and stuff like that.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I just did, I guess. All right, so true story. Now this is the Vi Academy in Carmel, and the Boss guys are there, and they've got cables, and I'm like, just what the world needs. Another company that decided we're going to make cables. This is another great skill. And I love the Boss guys. So, so the whole thing, I'm just like, great. And mind you, if it's free, I'll take it. And, kind of by the end of camp, I managed to round up at about a good 6 or 8 cables. So one day I'm sitting
from all the
here,
ones we left at the amps and rooms and stuff. Yeah.
And I'm sitting here one day. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll plug one in. Kid you not, they have become my go-to cables. I love these cables. I think they sound great. They feel great. They're rock solid. I love these cables, and I totally was like, I totally threw you guys under the bus. So it's such a great story. I had to share it with you. I don't think I've told you that, or if I have, it's worth repeating.
I don't know that you told me that you had found a way to finagle 6 of those. But I mean, if you needed them, I would have given them to you, no problem. But yeah, because we usually show up those things and we bring amps for everybody to play through, and so we bring a bunch of cables. And a couple times we've shown up and we've brought a bunch of cables just to hand them out to people and stuff like that. So I'm glad you got some of those. Yeah, the Boss cables, they sound fantastic. They've just got a tone. Trust me, they're really phenomenal sounding cables. But above and beyond that, they feel nice. They've got that nice textured, carpety type feel on them, cloth, and they're really nice. They come with a Velcro strip on them, so they wrap themselves up. But they don't break. And I will tell you, they've got a lifetime warranty on them. And I think we've had 3 of them come back. And it's just been amazing. I can't not tell you I am right. So I'm going to admit to something that's really bad. I do a lot of trade shows, or at least used to before COVID. And we get these things out of the bag, and trying to connect cables to everything. I've been in so many situations where I didn't have anything to clip the strip tie that's on them, and I've just taken them and literally just twisted the freaking cable until the strip tie bust. And there's 3 or 4 of them around there. Now, the snap, snap, snap. You would think this would ruin most cables, and I have not broken one doing that, and I've done it, 50 times so far. So they are, industrial strength and sound great. So please. But what triggered that conversation is not too long ago, we did introduce a normal 5-pin DIN MIDI cable to a TRS 1/8 inch cable. So those are available from us if you guys need a cable for that, because we're not the only company now that's doing 1/8 inch MIDI over an 1/8 inch cable. So if you need a cable, we've got it available.
I want. This is what I did to this poor little cable, though. What happened is there was an amp that decided to do a stage dive, and the cable was plugged into it. I was very lucky that it was not as disastrous as it could have been. That cable, I'm afraid, has been retired. But I will say again, I was like, who, another brand and more cables. What makes them sound? I mean, why do they sound good?
The the short answer is it has to do with impedance, and there's basically like, you think that you want to get the impedance down to a certain point, and there's like this point of no return where it's like if it's too theoretically perfect, it gets bad and it starts ruining your tone, and so there's something to do with the balance of that, and they really worked out what that is and how to measure it and how to get it dialed into a place that is very musical for guitar, right? And because you try and get rid of all the noise, try and get the impedance right, and stuff like that. And there's the point where too perfect becomes sterile, cold, and boring, and ruins your tone. And a point, where just unperfect enough is the right tone, right? So knowing that magical balance is in there, and that's one of the things I have to hand it to the team. They know these things.
Couple of comments here and a last question. Does the analog and dry signal? So, can you create an analog path? I presume that he's asking about in the GT-1000 core.
Yeah, it doesn't have.
It's A to D. It's 32-bit A to D. So once it's in the box, it's in the digital domain. Correct?
Exactly. So it is, and we should probably explain what 32-bit does and why it's important. So first off, there isn't a 100% true bypass analog path, right? And that's okay because it's running at 32-bit A to D with 32-bit floating point processors. Now, when people usually talk about digital, they usually talk about sample rate. It's 96 kilohertz or it's 44.1 kilohertz, right? Sample rate basically gives you frequency response. It's the number of times you sample a waveform per second. And bits give you dynamics, so how loud something can go, right? Every bit basically gives you 6 dB of dynamic range, right? And with guitar, to a certain degree, bits are more important than sample rate. Yes and no, right? And I'll explain that. Number one, sample rate is really important for distorting anything internally inside the box, because if you don't have a high enough sample rate, you'll get what they call aliasing. Aliasing is the scourge of digital processing, right? And when you distort something, it creates a square wave, which creates really high harmonics, and it starts to alias. To those of you who've probably heard it, it almost sounds like a squelch knob on a CB radio, right? Or if you remember those kind of things, or a ham radio, it sounds like a squelch knob underneath your guitar signal. So internally inside of our boxes and everybody else's box, they do good sample rate outside, and then internally they do what's called oversampling. They run it at a much higher rate and then downsample it after they've created those harmonics and try and clean it all up, right? And the quality of one company versus another company has a lot to do with how good their downsampling processor is for the distortion. And was one of the first things when I started working at Boss. I'm like, well, what are you doing, right? And they were like 96 dB down, so it was really impressive, right? Their downsampling rate. The second thing that's really important for guitar when it comes to any type of external piece of gear or digital piece of gear is, if you're going to use guitar, we like distortion. Distortion is created by adding gain until it hits those rails that we talked about earlier, and that starts creating distortion. So what you're doing is you're taking little tiny signals and you're making them really, really big. So if you were 16-bit, you've only got 16 bits of dynamic range. So the lowest stuff, the stuff in the middle, is very on-off, very squarey, very bitmappy. By having 32-bit A to D, you actually have over 4 billion additional points of resolution over a traditional 24-bit system. And that's going to give you tons of ability to have good quality, low-level signal that when you add gain from a distortion pedal or a distorted amplifier, usually gets pulled up and you can hear all that crud. And that's why you go, oh, that's digital sounding. By having all this extra bits inside of there, that's one of the things that really makes it sound truly analog, and whether you know it or not, you're responding to it, Doug. You're part of the reason you're like, oh, this feels right. Part of the reason it sounds clean is that it didn't bring up what they call least significant bit, LSB, because usually as a signal loses resolution as it gets close to, because you have positive and negative, as it gets near the zero, it starts getting stair-steppy, and then it gets lots of detail, stair-steppy, right? Well, if you got more bits, there's no stair steps. It's nice and smooth and all that stuff. If I'm playing back a CD, you don't hear that stuff because everything else is loud and it's right in the middle. With a guitar amp, I'm going to take that stuff and I'm going to make that stuff as loud as everything else to get distortion. And that's where all the crud comes from, and that's where a lot of digital products show their internal issues and stuff like that. And so Boss products, if you look at the DD-200, all the 500 series pedals, all the 200 series pedals, the GT-1000 and the GT-1000 Core are all 32-bit ADD, 32-bit floating point, 96 kilohertz as far as the incoming sample rate, but it oversamps sample rates at much higher rates internally for the tubes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really one of the things you probably will notice, even if you just pull up like a reverb or something like that, is that it's very sonically quality. It's just like I'm not hearing any crud as I hear tails and delays or reverbs or like that, because they've got all that extra bit to slide through, and it's really nice.
Well, it's an interesting thing, crafting reverbs is an art. And my go-to reverb generally is either kind of like a 60s spring or a plate. And it's interesting, some plates are really kind of hard you get into some units and you're like, I can't make the plate sound good. And it's that stuff that, you can explain that I can't, other than the fact that like there's something that is not like a plate reverb is a very special thing when it's like the EMT that's in the UA. It's like it's just a thing.
They did a phenomenal job with that EMT plate that they did, right? Yeah, so there's the different types of reverbs that we deal with, and I'll just kind of explain them because they're kind of fun, and people so an EMT plate, a plate reverb, the way it's done is basically it's a metal plate and you have a transducer, basically a speaker, and another transducer pickup on the other side of it. But the sound of it is, number one, there is no built-in pre-delay. Right? It's basically instant. You hear stuff. Second, it's basically the equivalent of hearing white noise, like just white noise decaying. Right? So they're all frequencies are all excited and they all decay down. And then depending how it's tuned, it'll either start to favor the low frequencies or the high frequencies. And that's kind of what it is. But they really show themselves in having all frequencies excited, and especially the high frequency stuff. When we talk about a spring I actually don't classify as a reverb technically, because a spring has what they have call a chirp effect. Because it's a coiled thing, bass frequencies and treble frequencies travel through it at different rates. So a spring, if you listen to it, and this is important to know if you were trying to set a preset, start by putting about a 65 millisecond pre-delay on it, because it takes about 65 milliseconds for that first delay to go through, and low frequencies and high frequencies are chasing each other, so it starts to become smeared. But that boink boink sound is the bass and treble frequencies chasing each other. Classic springs in a device like a Fender Twin Reverb, they roll off all frequencies from about 300, 400 hertz and below. And it peaks out about 6,500 hertz, and then there's nothing above that. So they're bright, but it's bright because it peaks about 6,500 hertz. A Hall has a lot of pre-delay on it, right? 40 milliseconds or whatever, and sounds like a lot of delays all splattering and coming back to you and just getting smeared to death, right? So they all kind of sit in their different categories in places like that. So that's just kind of a quick thing. So basically, plates, kind of white noise, lots of high end, and then you can tune them, and I like to make them resonate a lot in the low frequencies, me personally. Halls, they've got a lot of pre-delay, and they sound like a bunch of delays that broke up and fell down. And then springs, they're about a 65 millisecond pre-delay, 65,000 hertz kind of peak and nothing in the low end, and it's a chirp effect. Low frequencies and high frequencies are chasing each other. That's why they make that classic, boing sound in them, and they're a lot of fun. But and then of course, if you're trying to do a studio sound, I've been really big lately on trying to make things sound like I'm sitting in like a wood studio or whatever. And I really like that kind of experience. I've even been doing through the live speakers. Those tend to be, most recording studios have about 1 second of decay time in them, and they don't have a lot of high end, and you'll tend to hear more low frequency in the room. So kind of want to roll it off, or if like there's a damping, turn up the low frequency damping and let it kind of ring a little bit. So that's just a kind of quick tour of reverbs. I've done reverbs for many companies, so I thought I'd share that with you for a fast. All right, nerdy stuff. Sorry, went too deep.
No, that's genius. All right, we seem to have exhausted. Chris, thanks so much. That's heavy, Doc. I want to thank everybody for hanging out. This has been a lot of fun. Alec Bourne, what's going on, my man? Good to see you. Alec is the MIDI mad scientist. Alec, I don't know if you've met Jeff. Jeff, meet Alec.
Hi, Alec.
Jeff is the one of several resident genii at Boss, but he is my favorite resident genii. So Alec is very active in the MIDI community, especially in the Helix end of things. So my guess is this particular box, hang on, let's go for a little up close and personal, would be of something he's like, oh, look at this. And Alec also knows the guys at Morningstar who make, that's, I've got a 6-button controller over there. And Alec, unfortunately, I think he's in France, as I recall.
Oh, awesome.
So I've been wanting to get him on the show because he is a MIDI mad scientist, but our time zones have not lined up. So it's some crazy hour there right now. And he also works at like some kind of crazy high-tech job. In any case, Alec, thanks for dropping in. And everybody, love you to death. And it's just been so great. Jeff, as always, just,
Italy.
Bene. My bad. There we go. Oh, wait. Here we go. So he loves your air as well.
Thanks. The air has been tremendously successful. It really took off for anybody at home that doesn't know what it is. The Waza Air, we took our core amp tones that we do in like the Katana Air and stuff like that, and we made a pair of headphones. And the headphones are wireless. There's a wireless device that plugs in your guitar, and the headphones, you play straight into it. All the amp processing's inside of it. And it has this really great 3-dimensional space thing that can be used just for 3D space, but it can also place the amplifier. Like I can put it right there in front of me or behind me, and as I turn my head, it'll stay there. So I'm actually in the room, and that ambient experience is so freaking awesome. It's really great. And it can stream Bluetooth audio, so that you can use it just as a regular stereo headset, or I can jam along with things at the same time. And there's even things like there's a stage mode, which puts your amp behind you, but also puts the band behind you. And as I turn my head, it's like there's the band, right? It's pretty, just pretty freaking stellar, right? It's a lot of fun, and they just sound great. I have to say, like right when that was announced, I had to sit in the airport. I was at LAX, and my plane got laid over, and it just got announced, so I could pull it out of the bag and show it, And I sat in some corner for like 2.5 hours and just had the time of my life, right? Playing guitar, right? And it's like, yeah, there's 1,000 people around me, and I don't care. I'm just totally happy.
I love it. Well, and thank you everybody, Andreas, Rick, just Alec, thanks for dropping in. Jeff, we've got a play date tomorrow, and
yes, we do.
Look forward to seeing a little bit more of you sooner than later, which is going to be great. To everybody again, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night. Next week, we do not have a guest booked yet. but there's a guy who plays guitar in a really, 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 really big band, and he has been at one of the guitar camps that we're in the process of just kind of figuring out the day that they're going to be able to do this. But I'm really excited because they're. That's all I can say. But in any case, everybody have a great night. Thank you so much. We're going to be doing, ideally in the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to have a demo up and running. I should say a video with some of these sounds. And the strategy in this moment, just we'll unpack it a little bit, is I think we're going to create a couple of little videos and kind of the first one's going to come out because we know these are kind of now hitting the population. It's actually kind of a neat thing. I don't think anybody's really done that where we're kind of going, hey, we know you're potentially looking at this. Here are the things that you want to know. Next week, we're going to be talking about the things that, we think that now that, some of you guys are on-ramping with this is the experience that we think is going to support you. And then now we're going to get all completely wacky and do some crazy rigs and all of that. So we're going to do something that's going to look a little bit like that. But it's fun because we get a chance to leverage Jeff's expertise, and we have a great time together. So it makes it all the
Absolutely.
more wild. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think what you said is great because we're going to go through and kind of show people what we're going to do in detail. If any of you had any questions of what we might want to show, like obviously like a 4-cable method would be really cool to show. A 7-cable method is kind of interesting, and there's various versions of a 7-cable method from stereo rigs to using like a Wazatube. If there's just anything you guys are curious on how to do, how to know, or anything like that, throw it up in the chat, and we'll try and take a look at it and try and answer those for you. I just really appreciate anybody and everybody who's been here hanging out with us, and always enjoyed my time with Doug because he's just awesome, right? Awesome human being, awesome guitar player, and awesome educator for the masses. And so I really appreciate being here to help out as much as I can, and everybody coming on and talking to us.
Well, with that said, have a great night. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
See you guys.